What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, December 6, 2016. Tomorrow is Pearl Harbor Day, and the commemorations are already ramping up here on the island of Oahu. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about today here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air. And let's just get right into the news here. Donald Trump is already indicating that he's going to be keeping his promise about cutting wasteful government spending. And apparently he has notified the Boeing company that when he takes office, he is going to be canceling the order for new Air Force One aircraft. And his concern was the contract is already looking at $4 billion. That's the bid from Boeing to build 2 new Air Force One aircraft. Now, in theory, the new Air Force One is going to be built around the Boeing 747-8, which is the follow-on to the 747-400. And the vanilla passenger aircraft itself actually goes for about $400 million. So in theory, you can get 2 of them for just $1 billion, not 4. Now, obviously, there's a lot of extensive modification inside the aircraft, both for the president's comfort and Secret Service, and also additional systems for security and communications. But $4 billion does seem like an awful lot, and it does look like a far cry from the old Lockheed Constellations that Truman used to use to get around on. And Boeing stock, unfortunately, took a hit with that announcement. But I'm in agreement here. That's overpriced. That's way, way overpriced. Now then, one of the electors down in Florida is out there saying that they're getting 4,000 harassing emails from Hillary supporters every single day demanding that he go against the will of the Florida voters and vote for Hillary Clinton. And it's like they're not even trying to hide the fact that Hillary is trying to basically hijack the election, overturn the election, and steal the White House. And everybody's still out there trying to say, oh, Trump is bad, Trump is evil. Apparently Madonna went on this show just screaming about how traumatized she was about Trump's victory, how she hasn't had a good night's sleep since the election, and how women betrayed us. And she's not even talking about Trump or politics. It's all about Madonna and how she feels and how she suffered. See her pain. Look what you voters have done to poor Madonna. And looking at all this nonsense, I find myself in agreement with Mark Wahlberg and, for once, Gene Simmons, that these self-centered celebrities screaming about how bad they feel about how America voted, like we should care, should just shut up. I mean, it is ridiculous. Now, Jill Stein is still pursuing her recount in Wisconsin. And, hang on. We seem to have a sound problem here. There we go. Sorry about that. Old equipment. Jill Stein is still pushing for recounts in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and she is still citing as her excuse, Russians hacked the elections, even though in one of the states they use punch cards and optical scanners that are not connected to the internet, and it can't be hacked. But she's still pushing on this thing. And here's a little something to put this all in perspective. Jill Stein's recount, which will not change Jill Stein's outcome in this election, is costing more money than it would cost to replace Flint, Michigan's water system completely so they had safe drinking water. So you can see where the priorities are in what's going on with all of this caterwauling. So getting on to this thing, this whole recount situation may be about to backflash horrifically on Hillary Clinton because with the hand recount, they are encountering massive evidence of election fraud. And over in Detroit, basically they're looking at the ballots and they're looking at the polling books from the precincts where people signed in to vote, and they're not getting a matchup. There should be just as many ballots in that box as there are signatures in that polling book. They're not lining up. And so they're saying there can't be a recount. Under Michigan law, a precinct can't be recounted if the poll book and ballot box numbers don't match. And under Michigan law, the results from the original election night tally stand. Now, over in Michigan, over one-half of Hillary Clinton's Detroit vote faces disqualification. And Michigan officials are saying they cannot reconcile the vote counts in 610 of 1,680 precincts. In other words, 59% of the precincts. And these are precincts where Hillary Clinton won by huge margins over Donald Trump. Again, because the number of voters recorded in the poll books do not match the number of votes recorded in the electronic voting machines. And specifically, the number of votes in the electronic voting machines were higher than the number of voters that signed in to vote in those precincts. And all of the fraud being detected favors Hillary Clinton. We're going to take a minute here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network. We're talking about the recount and how where all these recounts are taking place, they're finding all of these indications of massive election fraud. Now, over in Milwaukee, the Board of Elections is withholding the absentee ballots from the official recount. And so far, Hillary is losing more votes during the hand recount. She's down 34,000 votes. And apparently what they're finding are these glaring anomalies. One ward where Hillary won by a margin of 242-1 over Donald Trump on the basis of absentee ballots, and 6 other wards where Hillary won by margins higher than 100-1. See, what they do is they'll look at the ward maps, and there should be an overall correlation. Hillary up by 20% in this ward, by 25% in this ward, by 30% in this ward. They should all be basically the same. When you have these wards sticking out, where Hillary is winning by 242-1 or 100-1, that's an indication some fraud has taken place. You don't see that in a perfectly honest, normal election. And as a result, they're taking these wards with these extreme advantages to Hillary, and they're revising them downward to be in line with the margins of neighboring wards and with the county-wide overall, the averages overall. They're basically finding all this massive election fraud. And we knew when Jill Stein launched this recount, there was a real danger that they were going to find all this election fraud. Hillary may just come on out and say, yeah, I committed election fraud in those states, therefore they can't participate in the Electoral College. What are you going to do about it? I'm about to be the president, so you can't do a thing to me. Now, Jill Stein's lawyers have mounted an effort to kick, or rather to block certain judges from the Michigan Supreme Court from ruling on the recount case. And as much as I hate to admit it, she does have a legitimate point. Some of these judges are on the list of possible Supreme Court picks by Donald Trump, and that represents a conflict of interest. But they're already out there trying to tailor the court so it's going to go Jill Stein's way. Now, Jill Stein is doing all of this for Hillary Clinton, and she's got to be feeling a little bit abused right now because of an article that came out in The Independent over in Great Britain, which is now blaming Jill Stein for Hillary Clinton's loss, saying that Jill Stein's Green Party sucked votes away from Hillary Clinton, and that Jill Stein handed the Republican candidate the presidency. Really? I thought it was the Russian hackers. No, now it's Jill Stein. And I imagine that Jill's got to be a little bit irked that she's now being blamed for Hillary's loss, as if Benghazi and the private email server and possible espionage, corruption, pay for play had absolutely nothing to do with Hillary's defeat in this recent election. That all doesn't really matter. It's all Russia's fault. It's all Jill Stein's fault. It's the women betrayed us. I mean, it really is ridiculous. Now, Donald Trump, using his own media venues, his Twitter account, his YouTube channel, he doesn't trust the corporate media, and he's wise not to do it. The corporate media has clearly adopted an adversarial position. He's not going to play nice with them. They're going to go after him. Trump has just announced that Masayoshi Son, CEO of SoftBank, has just pledged to invest $50 billion in U.S. industry, creating 50,000 new jobs. He's already out there keeping that promise to bring the jobs back, to revive American manufacturing. I think that's a really good sign for the future. Joe Biden has just announced that he plans to run for president in 2020. And I would be very careful about getting into small aircraft, Joe, because Hillary wants that nomination in 2020 if she doesn't steal the White House now. And remember what happened to John F. Kennedy Jr. when he declared for the Senate seat that Hillary coveted. Now, Judicial Watch has petitioned the court over the email case for the videos of the depositions of Hillary and all of her staff. They were deposed on video. The court sealed the videos so you can't see their facial expressions and provided transcripts. Well, Judicial Watch is saying it's time for the videos to be made available so that people can watch the faces of these people while they testify and judge for themselves how truthful they may or may not have been. Interestingly enough, the Bernie Sanders camp is now threatening a lawsuit against Project Veritas over a video that revealed violation of campaign finance law by the Bernie Sanders campaign. And apparently the violation was Bernie Sanders funded members of the Australian Labor Party to deface and or destroy campaign materials and signs of Sanders' opponents on both sides of the political aisle. So that's where a lot of this lawn sign destroying was coming from. It was a bought and paid for operation. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, John Stadmer was talking about this yesterday, the fake news stories, which I've always associated with the mainstream media. Much of that was fake news, conjured up, and propaganda. I thought about how can this all stop, but basically it's the old saying, it's always about the money, so that would mean that the corporations that, spend their advertising dollars with these networks were to pull their money from these networks, because their reputation's on the line now, too. They've been backing the wrong horse, and they've been backing fake news. So if they pull their money for advertising dollars from these networks, they will definitely crumble.
They definitely will. Most of these TV news networks in the corporate media are actually losing money hand over fist, but they're being underwritten and subsidized by their parent corporations and owners to go on basically trying to control what Americans are thinking, and everybody got the ice bucket challenge on the election, that the corporate media can't do that anymore. Now, for the corporate media itself, despite all of these faux repentant editorials about we will try and be better in the future, the fact is they're trapped by their business model. They make the huge amounts of money they make for lying to the American people and being very convincing about it. If they stop that, if they start telling the truth, the people writing those checks to prop them up, they're going to put the checkbooks away. And they're all going to have to learn to live without those multi-million-dollar paychecks. So they can't change their business model. All they can do is keep on doing what they do, lie to the American people, and launch smear attacks against the independent media, which is out here doing the job the corporate media pretends to do, which is acting as a watchdog on government abuse.
Yeah. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it 6% now believe that they tell the truth? Only 6%.
The last poll I saw, only 6% of Americans trust the corporate media to be truthful, and that's an abysmal number.
Yeah, I wonder what the numbers were prior. I mean, are Americans just getting smart now and wiser to corporate media? I mean, they came out blatantly and said we are here to try to get Hillary Clinton into office. That was right there in your face. Then we have George Soros showing how much control he has with his money and what he wants accomplished. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think the Americans finally just kind of caught up with that and wised up with that, or did it just, what else happened?
I think it's a continuation of a process that's been going on for quite a long time, and I think the watershed moment was when everybody realized that no, Iraq had not had weapons of mass destruction. It wasn't a simple mistake. They got lied to, and trust in the media, trust in the government has been declining ever since, and I think this display they put on during this election year really just accelerated an already ongoing process of disenfranchisement, decay, loss of trust, loss of faith. As Trump's spokesperson points out, the biggest fake news story of this year was Trump cannot possibly win the White House. And who was putting out that fake news? The corporate media.
Yeah, those poll numbers were amazing. You know, I just saw today, I don't know if I emailed you this, but now the numbers are changing again of saying now 2.5 million voters as far as a popular vote for Hillary. And first it was 1.6, 1.4, 1.7. Now it's 2.5. That number keeps continually changes.
Well, you have to ask, why is it continually changing? Except for these 3 states, all the numbers are actually finally in. What they're trying to do is convince you that Hillary is so popular that we should just overturn the Constitution and throw out our existing system of government and anoint Hillary Empress the First. The problem with that is, of course, the popular vote numbers aren't changing, except in those 3 states. And so far in those 3 states, for the most part, Hillary is losing votes as all this fraud is starting to surface. And what they're ultimately trying to do is they can't get around the reports from votefraud.org and truethevote.org that at least 3 million non-citizens did vote in this election. So they're trying to slowly creep Hillary's popular vote advantage above that number. So they can say, well, all right, even if you subtract out the illegal immigrant voters, and we certainly did not encourage them to vote for Hillary Clinton, Hillary still won the popular vote. And it's getting more and more extreme. But except for Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, Hillary's popular vote numbers should not be changing at all. And they're jumping up by numbers which are so large. I mean, you're talking about, you know, the entire populations of entire cities here.
Agreed. Hey, thanks again.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, then, Judicial Watch announced today it got records from the U.S. Secret Service about the first family's travel expenses, which you all cover. And the first family's Hawaiian vacation, Christmas vacation, last year basically cost $4,823,000. Now, my understanding is the rules of the White House are the taxpayers pay for anything connected with official business. If you are the first family, you're the president, when you are not entertaining diplomats, lobbyists, heads of state, you're just home with the family, and you're eating a meal, you actually have to pay for that yourself. A lot of presidents have not been happy about that, but that's the way the rules work. The taxpayers are only supposed to be paying for official business. Well, Obama's been out here to Hawaii for their Christmas vacation 8 times because they came out before he took office, and we're going to have the 9th one end of this month. That's not official business. And yes, I understand he's got to have Secret Service protection and everything, but does he really need to bring along Air Force One as opposed to one of the smaller transports that are in that particular Air Force wing? But so far, over his 8 years in office, Obama's family travel expenses, not related to official business, total $85 million. And as I said, we've got one more to go end of the month here, which added to the light rail construction and all the last-minute holiday shopping, the traffic is going to be a nightmare on this island, and I'm not looking forward to that. I'm going to stay on my side of the island. Obama stays on his side of the island, and I will be very, very happy. All right, we're going to take a quick break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'm watching Obama. He's making a speech down at MacDill Air Force Base. Basically comes under the heading of trying to polish up his legacy. And he's out there with comments like, you know, we've always prohibited torture. Doesn't matter what you prohibited. What matters is what actually got done. So getting on back to the news here, ABC has now picked up the story of Trump getting SoftBank to invest $50 billion in our economy. And the corporate media, they're going to have a stroke over this. How are they going to demonize this? How are they going to turn this around to say, oh, Donald Trump, he, look at the terrible thing he's done. Doesn't look terrible for those of us who are out of work, does it? Now, getting on to this issue about the war between corporate media and the independent media, the European Union is now demanding that Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook censor illegal hate speech. In other words, anything that does not fit with the official government narrative of the European Union. Hate speech has been redefined so broadly that it can be applied just about anywhere. We all know it's nonsense. When you're criticizing the actions of somebody's government, that's not hate, that's criticism. But it's hate, and hate allows us to, violate our laws on freedom of speech here. We are seeing another trend emerging in the corporate media. Normally when you go to their websites and they have a story, they'll have a comment section. And over the months, people who write observations that are not in line with the official story or who point out the obvious problems in the reporting of those stories get banned. I've been banned from Reuters and 2 or 3 others. I don't remember which ones. I usually find out when I try and post. Now we're seeing a new trend. More and more of the websites being run by the corporate media have simply dropped the comment section. They don't want to hear from you. It's costing them way too much money to hire posters to go in and argue with you to make you look silly because it doesn't really work. So they're going back to the model. Here is what we say. You will read it and you will not feedback. Going right back to the 1950s on that. So, article that came out of Veterans News now pointing out that the problem with the corporate media is not just the fake news. It's the fact that the corporate media pointedly does not report on important things that they don't want the American people to know about, such as Israel's continued crimes against the Palestinians and their neighboring nations. We're not going to talk about Israel here today. We're going to go on over and talk about Kim Kardashian's return to celebrity status. And more, the corporate news media are starting to remind me of those supermarket tabloids at the checkout stand here. Hey, that's what's being sold to us as news, the latest celebrity gossip. I don't care. I don't think anybody else does. It's just a constant attempt to distract us away from the real issues, from going on out and saying, what's going on in the world? I need to know. And we're seeing a flood of stories now attempting to use this Pizzagate hoax to demonize all of the independent media. And they're out there saying, all those independent media, they were just saying that this pizza parlor was the hub of a child molestation ring. Well, unfortunately, some independent media did fall for this hoax. And some did not. Let's keep that in mind. But we're already seeing quotes about, these people who said the pizza parlor was a hub for child molestation. They're the same ones who said Israel was involved in 9/11. They're the same ones. And see how the propaganda works. They set this thing up. They tried to get everybody to bite. I was actually getting emails toward the end there when I was refusing to carry this story because it was obviously a false flag hoax. And I was getting all these emails saying, if you don't run this story, I'm going to post all over social media that you're a child molester and you're trying to protect the other child molesters. And they were just desperate to get me to put this on my website. And some of the members kept posting and I kept deleting it. And as it turned out, I was absolutely right. Because they're attacking Alex Jones with this. They're attacking the independent media as a whole. And now they're using this ginned-up shooting to claim that independent media is leading to violence in the streets and must be controlled. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm already getting emails from people who are planning on coming to Hawaii end of this month for the Christmas holidays and saying, where should we avoid? And in general, the south part of the East Coast, Kaneohe, and further south down around the Sea Life Park, that's where the Obamas are are staying. But, of course, they do travel around the island. They're probably going to go to Ala Moana Shopping Center to do their Christmas shopping. They actually shut down the Neiman Marcus, kicked all the regular customers out, and it was just the Obamas and those store clerks that had passed muster with the Secret Service while they went on in there. And I'm sure Neiman Marcus appreciated the honor of serving the presidential family, but probably in the long run they actually lost a lot of money because of other customers who couldn't get in there. Obama is still making his speech. He's still trying to polish his legacy, and he actually made the comment, democracy should not be in a permanent state of authorized war. Look who's talking. And he's literally out there trying to rewrite his own future history. How he was a peace president and he got the Peace Prize and this and that. And it would be laughable if so many people hadn't died, proving the exact opposite to what he's saying here. Now, getting back to the issue of real news, fake news, independent media versus corporate media, Nigel Farage gave a speech at a conference for the corporate media, and he ripped into them and basically said, if you guys don't change what you're doing, you're not going to be here much longer. And Edward R. Murrow would have been proud of Nigel and what he said. And he's absolutely right. Ultimately, the liars are going to fade into history. And again, a lot of what we're seeing right now is a replay of the turmoil that happened when Gutenberg rediscovered movable type printing. And all of a sudden, books were affordable to the middle class, literacy exploded, and people were able to read things and share information. And the rulers of Europe were in a panic. The clergy were in a panic. Every church had made alterations to their own Bible to suit whatever their particular point of view was, and none of them lined up. And all of a sudden, people were saying, wait a minute, how can this be the true Word of God if you're saying one thing in this building and something else in the other building? Do you know, speaking of the war on truth, the gentleman who did the first English language translation of the Bible was actually burnt at the stake for it, along with all of his Bibles? That's how panicked the establishment was back then, and we're seeing a repeat now. What we're seeing right now is the digital age version of the Nazi book burning. Das ist der Fake News! Das ist der Fake News! Getting some gasoline. Now, story out of Veterans News Now, a call to develop alternative social media and search engine platform competitors that aren't evil. And now is the time to be making that push out there. And as a matter of fact, it's already underway. The Yandex search engine is very capable. It's not being censored. It's not being filtered to suit the American point of view. New social media platforms like Scene Life, Gab, Diaspora, they're all coming online. We just put up an ad for a new one called the Liberty Caucus, which is an uncensored forum where you can share ideas. There's going to be an explosion of these alternatives to Facebook and Google. And they're going to start losing their audience, and they're going to lose money, they're going to lose advertisers. It's already happening. We were reporting yesterday how Google's founder's Facebook, his fortunes are already in decline. And as I said yesterday, what people need to do is complaining the corporate media won't do anything. They can't change their business model of lying for big bucks. But you can start going to the website of the people who advertise on the corporate media and just say, I'm boycotting your products from now on because you're sponsoring a propaganda outlet. That message will be heard loud and clear. Now, the Washington Post is still standing firm. They're refusing to retract that McCarthy-esque smear of the independent media, saying we're all in cahoots with the Russians. We're all Russian agents. I love Paul Craig Roberts. He came on out and he said, I'm busted. Yep, you got me. I'm a Russian agent. Very much tongue-in-cheek. And sometimes humor is the best way to deal with this. Yeah, and not take it seriously. I mean, the independent media, we've been under attack by this group or that group all along. Southern Poverty Law Center went after me a while back. Now it's the Washington Post. I think we should almost feel proud that we are seen as such a threat to CNBC, Washington Post, the New York Times, and so forth. They're really afraid of us. We should take pride in that. Now, there are a lot of concerns being raised over House Resolution 6393, and concerns that it could actually result in independent media being thrown in prison for criticizing the government. And they're basically saying we're in this age of absolutes. Remember when George Bush, when he was out there saying we don't need the Fourth Amendment, said either you're with us or you're with the terrorists? And now we have the Washington Post basically saying either you're with us or you're with the Russians. So there's a concern that H.R. 6393 could result in some of us in the independent media going to prison merely for speaking out against government corruption. And this article that is expressing this concern over it before it's news mentions the Trading with the Enemies Act. Well, there's a little bit of a wrinkle there. First of all, the Trading with the Enemies Act involves actual commerce. Now, in the run-up to World War II, some of the big Wall Street banks were financing Adolf Hitler's rise in Nazi Germany. And these were the same bankers that tried to organize the coup against President Roosevelt. And Roosevelt couldn't do anything about it until there was a formal declaration of war against Germany, and only then did the Trading with the Enemies Act come into play. Now, so far, the U.S. has not formally declared war against Russia, so that's not going to be a factor. But there's going to be harassment. All of our servers are under attack. The corporate media is trying to smear us as Russian stooges. And it's a reminder that the people who are in control of the corporate media are really a bunch of Cold War fossils, where they're out there still believing that if they shout commies and Russians, Americans will wet themselves and salute the flag in fear. But there's a little bit of a problem. The current younger generation of America grew up without that constant brainwashing in the public schools to demonize Russia and the Soviet Union. And I remember very clearly when I was in public school, you know, the nonstop propaganda about how evil communism was and how evil communists were and how they were going to do all these terrible things to us, none of which, of course, ever really happened. And so this linking of the independent media to the Russians is not getting traction with the younger crowd. And I suspect probably not with the older crowd, who, like me, realizes that all the red-baiting McCarthy stuff going on was really U.S. government propaganda all along. Because when I finally got to meet some Soviet citizens at a SIGGRAPH, they were very nice people. I got snowed in once at the Frankfurt airport with an Aeroflot crew, and except for one guy who was a real jerk, they were all great people. I was talking with the pilot, and he spoke excellent English, which is kind of the international aviation language. And his son wanted to be a cosmonaut. And by lucky coincidence, I still had a bunch of my old NASA pins that I had on the outside of my travel case, polished my ego, and I just gave him, said, here, give this to your kid. And we just connected over that next generation. They're just like us. Kennedy said it. We all walk the same earth. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future. The ones who are out there saying Russia is an existential threat, they're the ones who are lying to you. That's the fake news. And I'll tell you why. We're already hearing from the Pentagon that they need a new generation of weapons to fight the Russian threat. Russia is an existential threat to the United States. They're coming to kill us all and take over our country. Considering the condition our country is in, I don't think Russia's going to be that stupid. Why would they bother? They'll be taking on another basket case. There's really nothing here that is to their advantage. But more importantly, my parents' generation footed a $5 trillion bill, and that was back when $1 trillion was really a lot of money, to build America's nuclear deterrent. Now, you can't have it both ways. We have all those nuclear ballistic missile submarines, all those Minuteman silos, all the bombers, all the nuclear-tipped cruise missiles. Now, either it's a deterrent and nobody's going to attack us, or it was all another military-industrial complex fraud, and we are all owed refunds with accumulated interest and adjustments for inflation. Russia is not an existential threat to the United States of America because of our nuclear arsenal. If we're only interested in protecting ourselves against a Russian invasion, all we need is that nuclear arsenal. We don't need to be sending weapons up to Russia's border, which is a giveaway right there who the real aggressor is. Now, getting into the war zones here a little bit more, the battle for Aleppo is intensifying. The Syrian army has freed several more districts in the east of the city, and the CIA-backed rebels are now in a bit of a bind, because they're all realizing that as of January 20th of next year, the supply of clandestine weapons and ammunition and other supplies is going to dry up. And they're evaluating their options. Now, in this particular article, which is in the Washington Post, they're trying to spin it that the moderate rebels will be forced to merge with the really extreme ISIS and Al-Qaeda if we don't keep supporting their operation in Syria. Which is nonsense. Everybody who's in Syria is there at the behest of the United States of America, and we know ISIS and Al-Qaeda are being supported by the U.S. along with the moderate rebels. So I have another option for those Syrian fighters. How about retire with honor? Just take the amnesty deal, put down your weapons, and just go back to being an ordinary person of whatever country you came from, because 95% of the so-called Free Syria Army are not even from Syria. They're hired mercenaries. And that is posing another problem for the United States, because the United States still has a lot of hired mercenaries and special forces and other people inside Aleppo who, if captured, are going to prove to be quite embarrassing. And so one of the issues the U.S. is trying to do when they talk about another humanitarian pause is they're trying to basically find a way to get their operatives out before they're captured and exposed for the world to see. And they are getting really, really desperate. Apparently, the European Union, which can't afford to feed its own people, let alone the refugees, is now offering Assad a huge chunk of money to break off a piece of Syria for Al-Qaeda and ISIS to have. The new agenda is they can't conquer Syria. They're going to balkanize it. They're going to break it up. The United Nations is out there talking about we need a safe zone inside Syria, for ISIS and Al-Qaeda, where they can mash their Play-Doh and cry and moan that things didn't go their way. But that's apparently the new strategy, is to call for the breaking up of Syria, and they'll let Assad have Damascus, and all the oil-rich areas will be under control of people who will be under control of U.S. oil corporations. Meanwhile, our Secretary of Defense is insisting that even after this current war with the Kurds and ISIS is over, the U.S. military must remain in Iraq to make sure those conquered people remember they are a conquered people and do what the U.S. tells them to do. Perpetual war. Exactly what Obama just got done saying no democracy should tolerate. Now, apparently, there's a Ukrainian member of parliament who has basically decided he's had enough, and he's split. And he's out there blowing the whistle on a lot of what Poroshenko is doing. And he's basically outed Poroshenko is taking the financial aid that the West is pouring on in, IMF money, which is supposed to be there to help retire debts, pay off the gas bill to the Russians, take care of the people who are in serious, serious hurt because of this U.S. botched coup d'etat. And he's spending it on war. And apparently there's a lot of massive bribery going on. And he didn't want to go along with it, at which point Poroshenko tried to frame him with bribery, which is why he has now left the country. Now, down in Israel, we are now finding out that women in Gaza who have serious medical problems cannot find medical treatment inside Gaza. They have to travel to Israel proper or somewhere else, for which they need the permission of the Israeli government, which apparently is routinely denied. And there are now estimates from the local health ministry in Gaza. There are now several hundred women with breast cancer in Gaza who are being forbidden to leave Gaza to seek medical care by Israel. And that's another form of collective punishment and inhumanity. Now, Netanyahu, of course, is struggling against new corruption charges, and somebody set up a golden statue of him in Rabin Square. And it was very hastily made. It's not a solid, real statue, but it went on up there, Netanyahu, the man of gold, we should all... And apparently an Israeli man just decided this was too much and knocked it over. We got the video on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. Now, Lindsey Graham, who never met an Israeli agenda he did not like, is out there saying that as chairman of the Senate's Foreign Operations Subcommittee, he is going to try and cut U.S. aid to the Palestinian Authority because the Palestinian Authority continues to pay money to the families of arrested Palestinians so that they can eat. And he's also targeting Egypt, because Egypt, like Russia, is now starting to kick out U.S. non-governmental organizations. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and I'm going to skip on back to this recount stuff because the stories are breaking fast and furious. Is that a trademark violation of the U.S. federal government, fast and furious? Anyway, as you know, over the weekend, Jill Stein dropped her petition for a recount in Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania required the posting of $1 million bond against the costs of the actual recount, and Jill Stein wants to hang on to as much of that money her sponsors have given her. So she dropped the state petition and then went to federal court trying to force Pennsylvania to conduct a recount at the taxpayer expense. Well, Michigan is now going to head that possibility off there. There's a bill that has already been approved by the House committee. It's about ready to head to the state legislature, House Bill 6097, and it stipulates candidates more than 5% of the vote behind the winner will have to pay the entire actual cost of a statewide recount, and they're making it retroactive to the beginning of 2016. Now, Stein's lawyers could argue it violates the ex post facto ruling in the Constitution. But it's already out of committee and heading for the floor. And that basically means that this Michigan recount is not going to be paid for by the Michigan taxpayers. It has to be paid by Jill Stein and her supporters. And again, talking about the corporate media literally declaring war on President-elect Donald Trump. And this thing I'm going to share with you, this is not coming from some supermarket tabloid. This is Time Magazine. And Time Magazine's Mark Weston has come on out there saying that the 65 million Americans who voted for Hillary Clinton should not pay any more taxes to the federal government until, quote, democracy is restored. In other words, make Hillary the president or we're not going to file our tax forms this year. I mean, this is just getting ridiculous. I'm pretty sure that Time Magazine has jumped the shark at this point. All right, getting on back to war and war zones. Apparently, the Pentagon buried an internal study that exposed $125 billion in administrative waste in its operations. Apparently, in order to not have Congress cut the defense budget, the Pentagon was hiring all kinds of paper pushers who really didn't have anything to do. In fact, they've got as many paper pushers as they have people in uniform. And the Pentagon isn't the only one who does this. I saw this when I was back at NASA. When we were hitting to the end of the fiscal year, there was pressure. Use up the money. Use up the money. Use up our, whatever. Otherwise, they'll give us less next year. So it's part of that institutional pressure. But $125 billion in wasted spending, that's a lot of money. And again, look what that money could do for the civic water supply in Flint, Michigan, as one example. Now, getting into the economic news, as you know, well, there's the music. We're going to take a break for our station identification. We'll get into the economy in hour number 2. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So we're going to talk about the economy for a little bit here. As you know, there are currencies around the world that are in trouble, and especially in Europe, as that little Ponzi scheme central bank continues to generate more debt than money with which to pay the debt. China's economy, which was heavily dependent on exports to the United States, has suffered since American consumers aren't able to buy those imported products. So the dollar is gaining against foreign currencies, which on first hearing you'd say that's a good thing. It certainly is if you're going to go on a vacation in those other countries. But it puts downward pressure on America's exports. Other countries can't afford to buy American products as the exchange rate shifts. And that is making our trade deficit worse. And it's already been terrible. It's like $1 billion a day flowing out of the country because we don't manufacture. We don't grow all that much. We survive on looting the rest of the world for our products and our food. Now, the European Union economy growth for the third quarter was just 0.3%. And that is primarily because countries outside the European Union are basically not wanting to trade with them anymore. The European Union is in serious economic trouble. And one indication of it is that the European Union has now revived a dance tax. Now, this tax was actually on the books in Belgium way back. But they have revitalized the tax, which means if you are running a club where people dance, you have to pay a certain amount of money to the government for everybody who comes into your club and dances. It's sort of like the storyline from Footloose. You're not allowed to dance where, whatever. And when they do that, when they start taxing things like dancing, you know they're in serious economic harm. We're still dreading, if you will, the fallout from Italy's referendum vote over the weekend. And we're hearing that the Italian banks are scrambling, trying to find some kind of capitalization to keep going. But at some point, there isn't going to be any more capital out there. And yes, the European Central Bank can just create it out of thin air, just like the Federal Reserve, but that inflates the value of the euro away and further weakens it against other currencies. Now, remember the Apple... remember the Apple Watch? You know, cute little gizmo, very overpriced. And when it first came out, I said, I don't think this is going to be a good seller. In a healthy economy where people have money for the latest fashion trends, yeah. In an economy where people are watching their pennies and buying for necessity rather than fashion, it wasn't going to work because it was just basically a smaller version of your smartphone on your wrist. And it really didn't give you anything over what you already had. And apparently Apple Watch sales have gone off the edge of a cliff. They sold 1 million units in the third quarter of this year, almost 3 million units fewer than the same quarter last year. And so it's really starting to fade. I imagine before too much longer, you're going to find really good deals for the Apple Watch out there on eBay. But again, I already have all of that functionality on my smartphone. Why do I need it on my wrist? What I have on my wrist works just fine. Very accurate. Got an altimeter. All kinds of cool stuff. If I need something on the smartphone, I take the smartphone out. All right, let's grab another phone call here. Glenn in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. It's good to talk to you. There is something that can be done about the mainstream media. It has put itself in a mess that it's finding a hard way out of. But if it were to start taking honest advertisers the same way RBN does, people selling honest products, not taking the giant checks from Monsanto, they may be able to save their credibility and actually become the fourth estate of the government that they were intended to be. What do you think about that?
Would you run that by me one more time? I was distracted.
Okay. If the mainstream media were to start following the models of things like RBN and other successful truth-based media and start taking their advertising dollars from companies that were actually honest, that were selling good products rather than criminals like Monsanto being sold out, taking million-dollar paychecks, etc., and just start over as the fourth estate that they were supposed to be, as the Constitution said.
Okay, I understand what you're saying here now.
They could redeem themselves.
Well, they could, but they won't because they're trapped by their own greed. What's going to happen is the corporate media is going to fail, and we're the new fourth estate out here in the independent media. And they're trying to point fingers at us and say, it's all the fault of those blogs and social media and everything. No, it isn't, because none of us would be doing what we're doing if the corporate media had been telling us the truth all along. I didn't sit down one day and say, someday I'm going to be a truth activist and a blogger and a talk radio host for virtually no money and, constant death threats and all the rest of that stuff. It was never an ambition of mine. My ambitions went in completely different directions, which were taken away from me. So, the corporate media has trapped it.
Them, though.
Well,
that now they're looking at the same thing because the people have lost trust. Their corporate sponsors are no longer going to support them, and all of those people are going to find themselves in the same situation you found yourself in 22 years ago, where they're suddenly at a loss.
Well, a lot of them already have. There's a lot of staff cutbacks in the corporate media. I've actually gotten resumes from people who were in the corporate media saying, can I write for you and everything? And I write back and say, do you think we have any money? Again, this is literally a war, as James Corbett puts out. It's a fight to the political death. And I do think we're going to see the large centralized corporate media collapse, and it will be replaced by a new media that will be along the model of what this country started with, where there are limits on how much media any one corporation or individual can own to preserve a diversity of opinion, to keep the public fully informed. And it's going to have its roots right here in the independent media. We're the foundation of where media is going into the future. They don't like to admit it, but again, they're trapped by their own greed and their corporate structure. They can't change what they're doing. They can't stop lying because lying is what they're paid the big bucks to do. So they're stuck. They're in a corner.
They're going to have nothing left, though. There's not going to be anybody paying them to lie because they've seen it's not effective. And exactly what you said, we're going to see the fourth estate start through the independent media, and they're going to be following you, and they're going to be asking, they're sending you resumes because people will advertise where people are listening.
Yes. And
there will be a big change. If Donald Trump is bringing in all of these new investors that you're talking about, and he's just he hasn't even started. He hasn't set his foot in the office yet, and he's already starting new businesses. Where are these new businesses going to get their advertising? It's going to be through the media that people are listening to. And so it's all about focusing on a new fourth estate, getting rid of these laws that limit the ability for us to criticize governments, and making sure that freedom of the press is something that we put at the forefront of our minds.
I think overall I'm in agreement with you, and again, we're just going to see how this all unfolds. But the monopolistic, monolithic corporate media is an endangered species at this point. They did it to themselves, and I have no sympathy for them. And we need to go back to that model of lots of independent media outlets to protect a diversity of opinion. Nobody who's in the independent media today dreams of being the next CNN or Fox News, because if once it becomes centralized, it becomes a target for subversion and infiltration. And I think, you know,
well, and it wasn't until Hearst that it was a means of making one person a multi-billionaire. Yeah,
yes.
Before that, it was a lot of honest, hard-working people like you doing their best to break stories like Watergate. When you go back to that film that with Dustin Hoffman, I can't remember the name.
All
of
the
it,
President's Men.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You know, back then, that's what journalism was, and that's what you guys are bringing back. And that's where the advertising for honest businesses are going to start springing up, because when Donald Trump changes the tax laws and he changes the coding laws so it's easier to go into business. I mean, you know how hard it is to be entrepreneurial.
Yes, I do.
The laws that you know, it's just absurd. And when that stuff changes, those resumes are going to be things that you'll be able to change, you know, take into consideration and say, look, I've got this name, you know, let's bring in these advertising dollars from these businesses. The whole model, we just need to start envisioning it so that we can allow this to happen. You know, we've got to, you know, stop. A lot of the people in the mainstream media, yeah, they're uneducated, but there are a few of them that are out there that do know what they're talking about, that aren't just paid to lie. They know they're lying. They have a conscience, and you know, they're looking for an outlet.
Well,
like
a lot of them are elite. Well, you know, look at Ben Swan, who left his corporate media position, and now he's got a new gig where he can be a lot more honest. Cheryl Atkinson. There are a lot of defectors and people who have either left or been kicked out of the corporate media because they really have reached their limit on how much they're willing to lie to the American people. Those two reporters on the Fox synthetic bovine growth hormone lawsuit, and I'm blanking on their names. I'll have to look it up over the commercial break. They decided they weren't going to be part of Fox News anymore, and they're out working independently. There are people who go into journalism because they want to be journalists. They want to be the next Bob Woodward and so forth. But the system corrupts those who work in it, because you get used to that money, you get used to that fame and that adulation. And if your job is to just sit and read what is on that teleprompter in front of the camera, you stop worrying about, you know, what it all means, because you're paid all that money to just read the words and be very convincing and very sincere to that TV camera.
But it used to be about making a living doing something important, and now it's about making a killing doing absolutely nothing.
Well, that is hardly confined.
I think it's going to go back.
That, yeah, it is, because that is not confined to the corporate media. Our entire country, this need to get these pieces of ink and paper to pay off the unpayable debts has destroyed the best qualities of what we used to call the American character. And I don't have a problem with people who want to make money, but there does have to be a balance. And I do think that we need, as part of the revival of American manufacturing, we need to start recognizing that actually making things does take skills and talent. And we should be proud of that, and the people who do that kind of work should be proud of it. Job satisfaction should be on a par with how much that paycheck is, and that is really missing throughout the vast majority of American corporate enterprise right now.
That's a very quotable quote, what you just said.
Thank
about
you.
Job satisfaction and the paycheck. And, you know, I think we just need to start putting these new ideas in our mind and making them happen, because this is a historical time where we have the opportunity to change the direction of so many things that have gone so awry. But it's important that we just focus on what are the core things. You know, of course, the Fed is the root of it all. But, you know, the media is the means by which they've controlled everybody's beliefs. And we're getting that back. And we need to start, you know, making sure that we monetize it, where people can make a living, not a killing, but a living. You know,
like I said,
by doing what you and Sibel Edmonds do, and, you know, people like that.
Those of us who are doing what we're doing here, we have no dreams that we're going to become fantastically rich doing this. It's actually been a very hard existence. You know, I'm driving a 17-year-old car. I'd like to get a newer one. At this point, I don't think it's going to be possible, at least in the foreseeable future. But after January 20th, if in fact Donald Trump succeeds in hanging onto the White House from Hillary and her machinations, I do think we're going to start seeing a swing where the audiences are going to come to the independent media, the advertisers are going to come to the independent media, and we're not going to get rich, but hopefully we're going to be a little bit more comfortable. We can pay off all of our backlog of bills and so forth.
Yep, I think you got it. I think we just need to make sure that we keep that picture there, so that's what we're moving toward.
No. The picture I am moving toward is a fully informed American public making good decisions at the polls in a nation with honest, verifiable elections, and certainly avoiding World War III.
Without people like you, how can that happen without people like you being able to support themselves and do what you do? You know, you guys are the core.
Well, thank you.
Julian Assange, you guys, I'm not trying to blow smoke, but I just, want to say you guys are the ones that have shifted this election. You give yourself a pat on the back more recently, ask for donations more often. I wish I could give you more. Mm-hmm. And I think that things are going to change in the near future. I think that we're going to see a whole shift in the culture of media. And I think that if we're at the forefront of, like, Steve Jobs had an image of what a computer could be that was 20 years ahead of what anybody else could imagine. And if we start thinking that same way about what media could be and how this country could be, that we can shape it and we can make it happen.
If we get President Trump in, we're in a very dangerous zone between now and December 19th. But if we can get past that and block Hillary's attempt to steal the nation, we could literally turn things around and pull this nation back from the brink, pull it away from 3 decades of control by the narcocracy, and we could actually possibly save this nation without having to go through a collapse and a civil war. And I'd certainly be on board with that. Anyway, listen, Glenn, thanks an awful lot for the kind words. We're going to let you go. We got to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who've rejoined our network, and we weren't able to get to that up until now. So getting on to the issue of immigration, one of the reasons these non-governmental organizations are coming under criticism all over the world is because more and more it's obvious their front operations to carry out political agenda for nation states that want deniability that they're involved in this. Russia, of course, has banned a lot of NGOs, especially those of George Soros. Egypt is now banning NGOs, which is why Lindsey Graham wants to cut off all U.S. aid to them, because those NGOs are tools of American foreign policy. And now we're getting this story coming, it's a YouTube video, where non-governmental organizations are smuggling migrants into Italy on an industrial scale. And this, of course, is in support of George Soros' dream of a single planet with a single golden throne and all of the people of planet Earth blended together into a formless, massless population with no sense of who they really are. Because if you have a strong sense of identity, you're harder to control. And that's what they're trying to destroy. They're trying to get us so confused about who we are, where we come from, what our history is, to the point where we're not even sure what bathroom we're supposed to be using. That's all a deliberate attack on your sense of self, your identity. And we need to push back against that. Now, out in California, the lawmakers are getting ready to try and pass a state law that would block President Trump's deportation plans, where they're going to declare California immune from federal immigration laws. And that, of course, is overruled by the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution. And there's something that all of these politicians who are on board with this sanctuary city, we're going to defy Donald Trump, we're going to do things our own way, there's a complication they need to look at. And when we come back from these words from our sponsors, I'll tell you what that complication really is. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about immigration. We're talking about how California is going to pass a bill saying that California is now immune from federal immigration law enforcement, blah, 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 blah. Now, there's a little bit of a wrinkle here. There are now 21 sanctuary cities in this country, and not surprisingly, these are cities that Hillary Clinton won by huge margins. For those who are still doubting that illegal immigrants did vote in this last election. And they're all out there saying, we're going to defy the president, we'll risk our federal funding. The mayors of these cities and the governors of states and the presidents of universities who are all saying we're going to be sanctuaries are facing more than the loss of funds. It is a felony under federal law to harbor an illegal immigrant, to provide them any kind of shelter, food, or support. If Donald Trump wanted to enforce that law, they're going to start arresting some of these politicians. Now, these politicians are out there screaming about sanctuary cities because they are supported by the illegal immigrant votes. But they're literally guilty of felony violations of federal immigration law, and again, because of the supremacy clause in the Constitution, any law California passes saying federal law is not enforced here is automatically null and void. Let's go back to the phones here. Ralph in New York City, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Ralph, are you there? I am not hearing Ralph. Okay, all right. Well, then we're going to move forward with our stories. Over in Germany, Angela Merkel is going to try and run for another term in office, even though her poll numbers are very, very low. She's probably figuring that if she gets twice as many election riggers as Hillary Clinton, she'll be in. But she's aware that her immigration refugee policy has become a major, major problem. Now, she doesn't want to close those open doors. So what she's done, amazingly enough, is she's called for a ban on the wearing of the burqa in public. So that even though the refugees are still there and causing all kinds of mayhem, the German people won't see them in the population because they won't be wearing the burqas. That's Merkel's thinking. So she's solved the migrant crisis in terms of her own political career. Certainly not for Germany and the German people, but that's how politicians will think. Now, over in Great Britain, activists are holding rallies outside the British Parliament. Okay, hang on a second. Is Ralph there?
Hi, Mike.
Oh, okay, there you are. Yeah, okay, we had a temporary glitch in our phone system here. Technical things. That mutant hamster fell asleep in the wheel, and that was our problem. So what's on your mind?
Mike, you know, Donald Trump today is saying that he's not interested in renewing the contract for Air Force One and renewing Marine One, and these budgets, it said it will cost $4 billion for the government to have new planes for the president, and Donald Trump is rejecting it. What's your opinion on this one?
Well, I think he's right. I mean, the base aircraft that they're using, the 747-8, only goes for $400 million. You can get two of them for less than $1 billion, and so Trump is right in asking, how is Boeing getting an additional $3 billion on this deal? And yes, we understand the presidential jet has a lot of internal cabin modifications, a very comfortable office for the president, a nice place for the press corps and so forth, and it has to have modifications for safety, security, and communications for the president. But still, it's a hard way to get from two aircraft for less than $1 billion to a final bid of $4 billion, and I think Trump was right to say this needs a rethink.
Right, because Ross Perot did that back in '92 when he was running for the presidency. He said we have to get rid of all these perks, Air Force One, get rid of Marine One, get rid of all these, big perks in government. Let's start riding local planes like all these regular people do.
Well, I think for members of Congress, that's okay. I'll tell you what, Ralph, I'm going to hold you through the commercial break, and we're going to come right back to this, all right? We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Ralph in New York City about Donald Trump's plan to cancel the next generation of Air Force One. Now, I think for most members of Congress, travel by commercial air is definitely the way to go. They're not really at much risk from their fellow passengers. I would agree that for the president and vice president, they need their own transportation. I don't think it needs to be that grandiose. If you look at, there are other aircraft that are going to be just as safe, just as long range. The president doesn't need to carry around the press corps with him. And basically, presidents have pushed for ever larger and grander Air Force Ones because it is a symbol of America's wealth and power in the world. But I think more and more people around the world are seeing it as a statement of ego and bragging because America is not seen as a great nation anymore. It's sort of Air Force One is now seen on the same level as the luxurious palaces of third world despots whose people are struggling in starvation and misery, and yet the rulers build these grand palaces. And that's what the Air Force One is. It's a flying grand palace of the ruler to try and impress other people with. And it really is too big. You don't need an entire 747-8, the world's longest passenger jet, and the largest one manufactured in the U.S., to lug one guy around with his support staff. And I really do think it's overboard. And I'm in agreement with Donald Trump. Something a little bit more modest. Vladimir Putin flies around in a converted commercial airliner that is much smaller, and it seems to work for him just fine.
Wow. So you mean tell me for future presidents, it's going to be a lot less. This is what Trump is trying to change for future presidents.
Yeah, I think it is now. A future president can come on in and say, you know, I want an Airbus A380 as my new presidential jet, and I would not be surprised if Hillary steals the White House. She might say that. I want the biggest aircraft in the world, you know, a flying, you know, palace.
Yeah, because Ross Perot said that back in '92 when he was debating with Senior Bush, that we have these big, get rid of Air Force One, get rid of Marine One, get rid of all these big budget government egotistical planes, and we can ride local and we could go on regular passenger planes.
Again,
you know, he said that. He said that in the debate with Bush, with Papa Bush in '92.
Again, I think Marine One is justified. Does it need to be so luxurious? No. But again, common sense, you know, especially given our modern politics, I do think a helicopter to get from the White House to Andrews Air Force Base is justified. One that big, I don't know. Having three constantly flying, well, that depends on the degree of threat that's being perceived at the time.
Right.
But I think it can be done much more cost effectively. And I think Donald Trump really does need to take a look at the Pentagon. Apparently, Congress is going to authorize a $600 billion defense bill for next year, just ignoring the fact that the Pentagon deliberately wasted $125 billion to head off any kind of a budget cut. I mean, I've seen the waste within the military-industrial complex firsthand, and you would just be staggered at what goes on over there.
Wow. Amazing. Oh, all right, Mike. Thank you very much for that question. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Kyle. Welcome to the show. What's going on?
Hey, Mike. What I think we should do is start something where we pressure Jill Stein to donate any of the money that's left over from the recap to charity.
Good luck on that one. If this bill in Michigan does pass, though, Jill Stein is going to be seriously in the red following the Michigan recount.
I mean, it's just completely unconscionable to me that somebody like her, I mean, that she's just showed her backside as what she truly is to everybody. The finances of this are staggering to me, that she's going to take all this donated money and essentially walk millions of dollars and just walk with it. I think that especially, I mean, I think it's something that Trump supporters should definitely get behind. She should not be able to profit from desecrating our electoral system.
Well, I think her petition should have been thrown out of court because she can't claim aggrievement because no amount of recount is going to change the fact that she came in as low as she did in those states. It's a frivolous lawsuit. She lacks standing. The only person who had standing to ask for a recount was Hillary herself, but Hillary didn't want to make the public spectacle. She wanted Jill to take the point on that, so Hillary could say, I really don't have much of anything to do with this. I'm not being the sore loser here. You know, it's all Jill Stein's doing, but we all know what's really going on.
Well, and suppose by some miracle that Hillary Clinton were to scheme her way into the White House. What sort of legitimacy do you think that the population would have for her? She would have, I mean, nobody would get behind any of her program. I won't say nobody. A large majority of Americans would just see her as a fake president who weaseled her way into the White House. It would be, her news would be cut off from the beginning. I don't know why you would want the White House in this manner anyway.
Well, I have to tell you, in all honesty, given that our economy is heading into a major collapse anyway, regardless of who's in that Oval Office, I have to question the sanity of both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton for wanting that job. But I know Donald Trump has been thinking about this for a good part of his life, and this was his opportunity because at any other election, he would have been seen as a joke. Donald Trump had an opportunity that was created by these decades of Bush and Clinton rule that wrecked the nation. And it was time for a reactionary populist president, and Donald Trump stepped on in there. And now the job is his. And he's going to have to deal with it, and he's going to have a really hard time with that economy. He's got an adversarial corporate media, an obstructionist Congress. This is not going to be an easy job for him. And, you know, but it's the job that he absolutely wanted.
Well, now, don't quote me on this. I'm not 100% sure, but I think I remember seeing a story from Trump back in 2008 during the financial collapse where he said that the way to fix it is nationalize the Fed, write off the debt that we have with them, and basically take between $1 trillion and $1.5 trillion of stimulus with no interest in it, and put it towards public work projects, i.e. high-speed rail, bridges, et cetera, et cetera.
He's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. And you know, when one of the biggest mistakes that Woodrow Wilson made in the creation of the Federal Reserve was he didn't put in a clause like Canada's central bank has of providing interest-free loans for national infrastructure development. And, of course, Canada's government does not avail themselves of that anymore. They borrow from private banks at interest and stick the Canadians with the interest payments. But, yeah, that would be, I mean, that's how North Dakota runs their state bank, which is owned by the state. It provides interest-free loans for infrastructure development within the state. And that's a really good system to have. Unfortunately, of course, as history has shown, presidents who go up against those private central bankers, bad things will happen to them. And I'm sure Donald Trump is well aware of that, and he's going to be wearing his Kevlar Armani. But, yeah, getting rid of private central banking would solve 99% of the world's economic problems.
I think that the one benefit that we be able to get from this collapse with Trump as president is we'll be able to, you know, focus our attention on the legitimate causes of all these economic disasters for once, and not have guys like Henry Paulson and Geithner trying to deflect it, saying, you know, it's the American people's problem for borrowing money.
Yeah, but don't forget they're backed up by the corporate media. That's a big part of the corporate media's job, is to tell you that the Federal Reserve is really wonderful, and that if you're suffering hardship and you've lost your job and your home and your business, it's really all your own fault. And the independent media, of course, is taking an honest, hard look at the realities behind private central banking, how it is a Ponzi scheme, and how it always ultimately drives the population into poverty, to keep them debt slaves, and to basically take the real tangible wealth of a nation, the real estate, the homes, the factories, and put it in the pockets of the bankers so they can rent it to future generations.
It's like the Matrix, the movie Matrix, where they say, you know, Zion has been created and destroyed 15 times. The economy has been built up and busted 15 times, and it's not until you get somebody in there, Trump, Neo, whoever, that can break the cycle and can bring some sort of legitimate change. And the first step to bringing that change is going to be to, you can't solve the problem until you know what the problem is and where it's coming from.
Exactly.
So my solace is that hopefully in this collapse, we'll get a nice speech from Trump coming out saying, this is because of the central banking system, this is because of this, this is because of that. He's on this.
Yeah, we need to go back to the banking system that we had when we founded this country. And that boom-bust cycle, have you ever noticed that whether it's booming or busting, Wall Street makes a profit off of it? It's like a giant heartbeat that pumps the real wealth of the nation away from the people and to the bankers. And so it's deliberate. It's actually part of the process. The money junkies can't make money off a stable, calm, unchanging economy. They need chaos. They need volatility so they can ride the straddle and make money very, very quickly. They don't want a calm, predictable, long-term economy. They want it up and down in chaos all the time.
The central banks are the NFL. It doesn't matter which team wins. It doesn't matter which team loses. The bankers always win.
That's exactly
right. They always
right.
get their money. They always get their viewers. They do better when that team goes on a 16-0 run and then collapses in the last game in a defeat. People are going to be watching. The bankers do great when the economy goes really high and then falls all the way down because they make it up. They make it on the way up. They make it on the way down.
All right. Well, Kyle, I don't want to get into football, pardon me, analogies. We're going to let you go. And before we take this next phone call, we're getting a break-in story, pardon me, from the Duran.com following the loss of more districts in eastern Aleppo to the Syrian army. Apparently there are reports circulating that the rest of the jihadi commanders in the city of Aleppo have opened negotiations with the Syrian military to surrender the city. So it looks like that party is just about over, and Obama and Kerry are going to be out there screaming, what do we do now? I already saw an article out early today where they're saying, well, even if Aleppo falls, the war in Syria isn't over. We're going to keep it going no matter what. All right, let's grab John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You are a terrible man, Michael.
How so?
You just stole my thunder.
I'm sorry.
With that story. Because John Kerry has just withdrawn all his proposals for the East Aleppo ceasefire and, let's get our special forces out quickly before they can be captured and all that sort of thing.
Well, it's all moot now because if this report is true, then the rest of the rebel terrorist forces in Aleppo are about ready to lay down their guns and surrender. And if there are U.S. mercenaries and special forces on the ground there and they're captured, Syria is going to put them on world display to show everybody how it was the U.S. that was behind all of this misery and suffering of the Syrian people.
Anyway, what I want to do now, Michael, is interfere in your politics.
Okay.
Because I hope there's Trump supporters and members of his team listening. I want to inject a name, Cynthia McKinney. She is a great woman. She is very intelligent, PhD. She is an African-American and a Democrat. That will solve a lot of the problems with race, with the cross the aisle, with the corporate media nonsense about his bigotry and racism. This will slay it. And Cynthia McKinney, if she did a good job in the state, maybe in 8 years' time, having had such an experience, she could run for president and knock Hillary into a cocked hat.
Well, I'm a big fan of Cynthia McKinney ever since she outed the fact that the U.S. Was painting the cluster munitions on bombs dropped in Afghanistan to look like the emergency food packets that were being sent on in. It was a really dirty trick because people, especially children who were hungry, would see those yellow and black containers on the ground, think it was a food ration, pick it up, and lose a hand. And, of course, she's been very critical of Israel, which is why she was driven out of Congress. I think
well, she criticized Israel in relation to the attacks of 9/11. She was if you like, not a full-on truther, but she was heading that way.
She was, and I've had her on the show a couple of times. I'd love to see her in some place in Trump's administration. I don't think he's going to consider her as Secretary of State. I'd also like to see Ron Paul somehow get brought on in somewhere around the economy. And again, for Secretary of State, I am still thinking that Tulsi Gabbard would be an absolutely wonderful person to have as our Secretary of State, and I'm going to go on saying that.
And as for this war in Syria now, if this is true that Aleppo has fallen back into the arms of the Assad government, then it looks like this balkanization will be over, because they can now concentrate on other areas once the terrorists have actually surrendered. And it will release an enormous number of Syrian Arab army personnel to go eastwards.
Well, what may actually happen is, because the U.S. can't back off this agenda of conquering all these resource-rich areas and shackling them to the dollar, we might see Obama and Kerry just come on out and say, okay, yes, you're right, we've been behind the efforts to oust Assad all along, and just order a full-on attack, and that'll bring us into war with Russia.
I don't know when there's... Even these people have to be fearful of these huge...
No, they're going to stick Donald Trump with it. Just like they're sticking with the crashing economy. They're going to start this war with Russia, and then they're going to retire to wherever they're going to retire to. Oh, it'll be a great laugh. We gave Donald Trump World War III. Thank you for the phone call, John. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to the phones here, a couple of stories coming on. First of all, I want to go back to that Pentagon admitting it wasted $125 billion just filling up offices with bodies so Congress wouldn't cut their budget. That waste, that Pentagon's admitted waste, is twice Russia's entire military budget. Russia spends 1/8 the amount the U.S. does on weapons of war, and yet we're being told by the corporate media that Russia represents an existential threat to the United States. We're getting more confirmation about that story. Apparently, it's all over Twitter now. The rebel commander in Aleppo say that they have agreed to withdraw from Aleppo following talks between people in Turkey and the United Nations. Apparently, they're being given a safe conduct conduit to leave completely. So it looks like Aleppo is back in the hands of the Syrian government, and I imagine there's a great wailing and gnashing of teeth over in the White House and the State Department. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Bomb them. Bomb them when they leave, Mike. You have to bomb them, because if they'll come back in another spot, it's like whack-a-mole. You got to bomb them. I don't care what. The UN is a disgrace. It's just another, like the World Bank and the IMF, they're just another patsy. You know what I mean? At this point, bomb these people. When they leave, Gatlin got them all. I know it's sick to say, but they got to be killed, Mike, because they're going to come back. They're going to come back in another part of Syria or another part of another country like Iraq. They got to be getting rid of. You got to send a message to them, man. You know, it's just,
well, the other side of that argument is that when you have vast amounts of money to hire mercenaries, there are always going to be more mercenaries available, and that even if something unfortunate were to happen to the retreating rebels, those who create these wars are always going to find more bodies to pick up those guns. And that's just a sad reflection on the state of humanity.
Hey, Mike, I want to switch gears. I really want to talk about John Barbados. He's wrong. Cynthia McKinney's great, but he's wrong. She wouldn't do anything. Trump could bring in Jesus Christ, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King, and they would still call them a racist, a homo. This is not about Trump people. This is about globalism. It's about neoliberalism. It's a cult. They'll follow Hillary off a cliff, a percentage of these people. Not just Angela Merkel to follow off a cliff. They'll follow Francois Hollande off a cliff. It's idol. These people are ideologues. When are people going to understand that? These people are, they're never going to, their minds are never going to be changed.
No, they're fanatics. They've got this vision of a one-world government, and they're not going to let go of it because as a class of human being or subhuman being, as the case may be, politicians can never admit that they were wrong about anything at all.
Can you hold me over?
I'm going to hold you over the station break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're talking with Dustin in New Jersey, and you had one more comment for us.
People know how dangerous these people are. They don't have a problem with killing anybody around the world and even here. If you look at the people beating Trump people up, they don't come out and say anything against that. They don't have a problem with arming terrorists. They don't have a problem with overthrowing governments. They don't have people need to realize these people are very dangerous. We're not in a funny...
They are.
History.
And I don't care what they call themselves. We're seeing basically a repeat of the same mechanisms that brought Adolf Hitler and the Nazis to power in Germany. Rigged elections, brown shirt attacks on the opponents, assassinations, and they are. Part of the problem is this belief that they are above the law. Part of the problem is that they are true believers. They're convinced they serve a higher, more noble purpose, and this justifies them violating the law, the Constitution, and so forth, and basically shaking off the limitations imposed on them by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It's okay for us to do this. We serve a higher, more noble purpose.
And if anybody don't believe that, just go on YouTube or do any research on the brown shirts, and you'll see what they're capable of, because, it's time to wake up, people.
We saw Hillary's people do Black Lives Matter attacking the Trump rallies and everything. That was all brown shirt tactics. All they were missing were the uniform shirts.
Yep. All right. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Well, I thank Dustin for the segue in terms of what these people are capable of. I don't like some of the stuff that I'm hearing in the news these days. Now, apparently, the U.S. has deployed 2 of the Marine-type aircraft carriers. I believe it's the Wasp and the Whidbey.
Yes.
Over to that region. Now, those carriers don't have catapults. They don't launch the air superiority fighters. They use things like Harrier jump jets.
And helicopters.
Helicopters. Yeah. And they deploy landing craft. Those are designed to carry troops and land troops in large numbers. So, presumably, they have a pretty good complement of Marines or soldiers on them. They're not going to keep them on those ships forever, if that's what they intend. I wouldn't put it past them that if losing Aleppo, they might, and I'm hearing these stories about tactical nuke being missing here, nuclear materials being missing from Iran, I wouldn't put it past these people to do a false flag attack nuke decapitation strike on Damascus and then try to land an invasion force.
Well, they might do the false flag somewhere else and say, see, it proves Assad had weapons of mass destruction, horror of horrors. But you're right. The U.S. has the assets in position where they could just do a decapitation strike into Damascus, take out Assad and say, well, it's over and done with. It's easier to get forgiveness than permission. And, that's that, on to Iran.
Yeah, because that's what those carriers are designed to do. They open up and the landing craft float out and they go out and establish a beachhead. So
I actually got to tour one of those once, and yeah, it's basically an invasion force in a single box, they have these huge internal bays where they have I think 6 or 8 of these landing craft that are already preloaded with tanks and guns and everything. It's an instant war kit is what it is. And up on that flight deck, as you mentioned, helicopters, attack helicopters, Ospreys, and Harriers and to basically go on in and project power across somebody else's coastline.
Yeah, and they're not going to keep those floating out there for 4 or 5 months doing nothing, because they usually have a pretty good troop complement on them. So that's a lot of.
Well, I imagine the Russian fleet is keeping a close watch on them.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, their carrier hasn't been doing too well. Carrier only carries like 16 planes, and they already lost a Sukhoi 29 and a Sukhoi 33. So that carrier doesn't compare to ours, and it's been having its troubles, unfortunately.
Well, I don't know. If you stack it up against the Gerald R. Ford, it's doing very good. At least it's out at sea, able to carry out combat operations, and that's better than the Gerald R. Ford can do. But again, Russia only spends 1/8 as much money on their military as the U.S., and they're going to have to cut corners, and this is their only carrier. But if you actually were to go and look at the record, you'd be amazed how many aircraft are lost off of U.S. carriers for one reason and the other. It's almost like a disposable commodity. I mean, we look at something like a carrier jet, and it's, $30-40 million, and we think of it as a single precious item. But they do lose a lot of them. In fact, you can go to YouTube and find all these videos of bad landings on U.S. aircraft carriers. They'll come on in too low. They'll do what's called a ramp strike, or they'll miss the wire and go off the far end, and they haven't spun up the engine, and you'll see the pilots having to eject. The U.S. losses off of carriers, even in peacetime, are actually pretty significant. But, those taxpayers, they've got lots of money. They'll buy us a new airplane.
Right. And if the Russians have mid-air refueling capability, they can bring in other planes to replace ones that have been lost.
Oh, they do have mid-air refueling capability, and they also have those long-range bombers that can now stage out of Iran. The backfires and the new updated Bear, and those have got some really, really long legs. Plus, during this Syrian situation, Russia demonstrated they have long-range tactical missiles. They're not nuclear, they're conventional. I suppose they could be nuclear, that are able to hit their targets accurately from thousands of miles away. So I think, I hope that the White House isn't going to do something stupid, but you never really know, because Obama's in the last few days of his office, and he might just say, the heck with it. Let's start a war with Russia. I'm not the one who's going to have to deal with it. Okay, Glenn?
Yeah, exactly. All right, Mike, take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network right now. We're going to take one more phone call and get back to the news. Dorothy in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. It's more of a philosophical question, but at what age do you think teenagers, children, should become politically aware? Well, let me tell you the backstory. I had children. And my father, as a small boy, survived German concentration camp. He survived typhoid. He's still alive. He works in the United States. He became a citizen when I was 10. We were learning both the United States government at the same time. He used to come in and ask me how to pronounce things. My children, my older child is aware that my father did survive concentration camp, but she doesn't necessarily know the evils of. How much information is too much information?
Well,
and
I think young people tend to direct their own learning a lot when it's not being imposed from outside. I started becoming politically aware at a very, very young age, just from noticing things that were going on around me. Some people don't become politically aware until their retirement age, and they start paying attention to who's talking about cutting Social Security benefits. So I think it's kind of a natural process, but I really think you would be better off focusing your children's awareness on current politics, because that's the world they're going to grow up in. And this obsession with things that happened before we were all born, I think it's very unhealthy, because it is distracting us from evils that are happening today, evils that we can actually still do something about. We can't change whatever it is that happened back in the 1940s. And we should stop obsessing about it. But there are evils being committed today that we might be able to influence, and so we should focus on the politics of today, not stuff that happened a long, long time ago.
Actually, that's what I was asking about. I was actually asking if it would be appropriate for my child to listen to your radio station. I just only brought that up because to a certain level she is politically aware, because
well, how old is she again?
It's hard not to. She's 13.
13. Well, she's obviously precocious.
She doesn't know. She doesn't know any. She doesn't know any details of Constitution again. But it's just some. It's because of our heritage. So I don't want to say what country we're from. I don't want any backlash. I'm politically active against Common Core in my town, and unfortunately, I come from a small town.
Good for you. Good for you. I mean, that's been a disaster. Well, I understand relating of family history, and we have a very long and well-documented family history that we share with the next generation. But again, your daughter's going to grow up in today's world, and that's where the focus should be. I don't think there's a reason for her not to listen to the show. She may not find it all that interesting. You might want to put her on to some of the articles that are at the top of the main page of my website, like the ClimateGate page and various other things, and just sort of get her used to the idea that maybe what she sees on TV isn't necessarily always the truth, and that's kind of the starting point of weaning people away from that blue pill on that TV set.
The TV has been successfully severed for almost 2 years now.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Well,
I just saw how much crap was on there, and it just wasn't worth it.
See, well, let your daughter take a look at the website and see if she's interested. And if she's interested, let her direct her own, follow her own curiosity. And if she's not interested, then don't make an issue of it. Don't push it. Okay?
And 13 isn't too young?
I don't think so.
Okay, just checking. Just checking. I'd like to just cross my T's and dot my I's.
Okay, well, like I said, I became politically aware at a very young age, partly because of my grandfather and Richard Nixon being drinking buddies. Anyway, Dorothy, we're going to let you go here. We got a bunch of news that we need to get into. And I started this story a while back before all the phone calls came on in. Pro-Brexit campaigners are gathering outside the British Parliament demanding that the Brexit process accelerate. They're tired of all the obvious foot-dragging by the Remain people, and it isn't that difficult for Britain to leave the European Union. Just start issuing British pounds. Well, I think they're still using the British pound. Put border guards on that Channel tunnel, load up the English Channel with sharks to stop the swimmers, and say, we're going our own way. We're not going to send any more money to Brussels. We don't want anything more to do with you and the ECB, and just go on their way. Now, Theresa May has gone to the British Supreme Court seeking an overturn to the ruling that the ultimate decision for Brexit rests with Parliament, that Parliament has to vote to trigger Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty. And there, of course, is word that Parliament's attitude is, well, we don't care what the voters wanted. We're going to do what's in our best interest to do, which, of course, we have that same problem with our Congress here. Meanwhile, in Italy, the repercussions of Renzi losing his referendum over the weekend continues. Renzi has announced he is going to resign. He hasn't yet. He could still renege and change his mind. But if his resignation is accepted, Italy's government would be handed over to a caretaker leader until the next general election scheduled for 2018 or until a snap election is called. Meanwhile, though, Italian bureaucrats are trying to rewrite Italy's election laws to keep out the far-right parties, like the Northern League, to keep them out of power, to keep them from running from office, the widely popular insurgent party, Five Star. They don't want them even running. This is how Italy is going to solve their problem. They're going to outlaw any political parties that are not in agreement with them, just like here in the United States of America, where the system is stacked against anybody who's not part of the official Republican and Democratic parties. Now, a lot of people are very concerned about this new law, the Investigatory Powers Act, the Snoopers Charter. And one of the problems that are in there is that it is now up to the British government to volunteer the truth to their victims if the state thinks it's abused the secret powers. It's kind of like kids being allowed to mark their own homework in school. But basically, this opens up a venue where the government could effectively lie in court to convict somebody, and the defendant would not have a fair trial because he cannot review or question the truth of the evidence against him if the government decides it must be withheld. That's a dangerous situation. Now, over at George Washington University, they've had a walkout to demand a sanctuary campus to protect illegal immigrant students. And again, harboring illegal immigrants is a felony that can carry up to 10 years in prison. Just something those students might want to think about. And then they have undercut their original agenda by demanding that the George Washington University also be a sanctuary from student loan debt and a sanctuary from underage drinking laws. And some students are even saying it should be a sanctuary on final exams because of the stress that exams cause. I mean, this is just ridiculous. And it only costs them $60,000 in student loan debt to be on a college campus where absolutely nothing is happening. That will certainly challenge their cherished liberal buttercup snowflake pansy beliefs, as it were. And not too surprisingly, the academic performance of America's young people continues to decline. Thanks to universities that are rigidly enforcing the status quo and indoctrination into beliefs like human-caused global warming. And the latest math scores continue to decline for Americans. There was that article we talked about a while back where America's millennial generation, in terms of actually being a workforce to support our economy, they're virtually useless. They're all graduating as art history majors. You actually can't get a job as an art history expert other than to be a college professor teaching art history to students. And you can see there's not going to be too many of those. We need to get our education back to reading, writing, mathematics, science, engineering, problem solving, being able to analyze and break down a problem and find your own solution. But of course, that's a very dangerous skill for Americans to have when they live under a government that lies to them constantly. We don't want those people thinking for themselves. We just want them believing. Remember, we were talking yesterday where this columnist over at Yahoo News is now saying public schools should be required to indoctrinate children to always trust the corporate TV news media and never trust anything they see on the Internet, which is going to have the banned in Boston effect. Because, I mean, children are always being exhorted about the dangers of pornography or marijuana. Has it really had any effect? No, quite the opposite. It's actually gotten their curiosities up. I want to see what they're talking about. Now, getting into the worlds of computer and computer sciences, Sony apparently had some 80 models of their TV sets that connect to the Internet. It's actually now a common feature. And it turned out that Sony had a secret back door in 80 of their models of Internet-connected TVs. And because these smart TVs and other Internet of Things appliances are now becoming the hunting ground of various botnets for denial of service attacks, Sony has issued a firmware update that shuts down the secret back door so that their TV sets cannot be used as hubs to send out denial of service attacks. I think it was a very smart thing of them to do, because they really didn't need a backdoor into the TV itself if everything can be fixed with a firmware update. But it was probably one of those ideas that sounded really good. Well, we'll leave a backdoor in there just in case we have to get on in and change something. Can't you change it with a firmware update? Well, yeah, we can, but we should have a backdoor just in case. But those backdoors are how these Internet of Things appliances are being co-opted for cyber attacks. Now, as you know, it's the Christmas shopping season. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. I got to get out Tom Lehrer's Christmas Time Is Here song. And there is a new toy out called the My Friend Kayla doll. And it has a partner called the IQ Intelligent Robot. And these things should scare the heck out of parents. And when we come back from these commercials, I will tell you why. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about two of the items that are now on sale for your Christmas pleasure. And that is the My Friend Kayla doll and the IQ Intelligent Robot. And the problem with these toys is the terms of service. You actually have to agree to a terms of service for a child's toy. And it allows them to record everything they hear and send that information back to Nuance Communications, which is a voice recognition software company that supplied the underlying technology behind the toys, but it also does work as a defense contractor. In other words, these dolls are spying on your kids for a defense contractor. And apparently consumer groups have already filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission over these items. And certainly they are not something I would ever consider for any of my children if I were lucky enough to have them, nor would I buy them for anybody else's kid. If the children want to talk to the parents. Don't talk to a doll that's working for a defense contractor. The doll's going to be in there brainwashing the kids. Oh, yes, human-caused global warming is real. The president is wonderful. Independent media is crud. You will go into your parents' bedroom while they're sleeping and take your daddy's wallet and send us the money. I mean, it's ridiculous. Are they trying to just get the kids used to the fact that they're being spied on all the time? Now, I'm presuming that these dolls are using the Wi-Fi in your home. And apparently the dolls can't do what they do, which is interactive conversations with the children without that Wi-Fi access. But again, this is ridiculous. My friend Carla and the IQ robot, absolute avoid. You shouldn't have any toy that's there that's spying on your kids, that's feeding them any kind of information or conversation not under the control of the parents. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Okay, now then. As you know, a lot of stuff heating up over the Dakota Access pipeline. The Army Corps of Engineers, apparently acting under orders from the Obama White House, have denied the easement permits for the pipeline to continue. The pipeline company has issued a statement basically saying, we don't care what the federal government says, we are going to continue building this pipeline. Tara Huska was out there saying the DAPL permit denial is a momentous occasion, but remain vigilant. He's absolutely right. And we have a video on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com where the construction is still going on. Artie from the Lakota People's Law Project is on that. They're in intense blizzard conditions. You know, all that snow that the UK Independent insisted was a thing of the past back in 2000. They're having to deal with that on top of everything else. And the construction is still going on. Now, we posted an article to WhatReallyHappened.com that features a map of Standing Rock, that whole area. And this is the part of the story corporate media has not told you. The pipeline's original route missed the Indian lands, but it went past the town of Bismarck. Actually, it's a city, a mostly white community. And due to concerns the pipeline might contaminate the water supply for Bismarck, this mostly white community, the pipeline was rerouted onto the Sioux lands, where it only risks the Native Americans' water supply. And by the way, you need to remember, the Environmental Protection Agency rejected this pipeline project because of the risk that was going to happen to the water supply, because the water in that area flows to 4 additional other states. And the oil company just said, we don't care what the EPA says. Now they're saying we don't care what the federal government says. This is literally a declaration of war between corporations and the federal government. Gee, I wonder who's got the most guns in this. But what's going to happen is from this point forward, the security people working for the pipeline project are not seen as having a legal or moral authority. They're seen as on an equal footing with the protesters. Violence will now be met with violence. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And getting on back to the Standing Rock protests and what's going on up there, there is a legitimate concern about the safety of these pipelines, and exacerbated by the fact that there has been another oil spill in North Dakota. And apparently Tesoro Corporation's underground pipeline was running underneath this farmer's fields, ruptured, and spilled 20,600 barrels of oil onto the farmland. That farm is a write-off right now. And it was the size of 7 football fields. That's how big this spill was. And then there was that other one down in the southeast earlier in the year. We all remember the Deepwater Horizon disaster. These oil companies spend as little as possible on their infrastructure, and it leaks. That's been a big problem with the fracking industry. The pipes are all leaking. They're leaking natural gas into the atmosphere. They're leaking chemicals into the groundwater, because they're doing it on the cheap to maximize their profits. All right, let's take a phone call. Tim in Wyoming, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it. Now, you were talking about smart TVs earlier, and I wondered, did you talk about the Samsung television that actually has been doing exactly what the Sony television's been doing for years? And they tell you, if you don't want your private conversations recorded, then don't do it in front of the television. And so, I mean...
But that's asking people a lot. You know, we talk about the TV shows, you know, we're watching the finale on Westworld, and we're out there commenting about what's going on. I mean, it really is ridiculous. At the very least, for the smart TVs, there should be a menu item where you can shut off the microphone, and if your TV has an embedded camera, and a lot of the new ones do, you can shut that off. Personally, I wouldn't trust the switch anyway. I'll just put a piece of tape over there. Not that my wife and I are doing anything indelicate in front of the TV set, but this invasion of our privacy by corporations and government has really reached a ridiculous degree.
Right, yeah. That's something that there was a program. It was a voice I believe this is what it was about. It was a free voice recognition program, probably. And this is what I say probably because it was put out in different magazines, a whole bunch of different magazines. They had a card in there. You could actually use and it was a free service. You could get stock tips and not stock tips, but stock information and all kinds of things. I mean, it was like calling 411 basically, but not really. But it was essentially, I believe it was a voice recognition system because it would ask you to say things over and over again just to make sure that they got it right. And I thought, this was probably 15 years ago, at least.
Well, so, that's what's called a limited context voice recognition system, and they're a very common part of telephone support. When you'll call on and they'll say, give us your phone number. That's a limited context. It's only there listening for things that sound like numbers or your account number and so forth and so on. What Nuance has developed, and by the way, they're the people behind the Dragon natural language processing system. That's a full context system where it will, understand all of the words that you might be saying and then do a scan for certain keywords. Now, the overt purpose for all of this is marketing. They want to find out if you're really enjoying the TV show. They want to find out if you're paying attention to the TV commercials and what you think about the products. But obviously, the potential for abuse by intrusive government agencies cannot be ignored in all of this.
Right. Like you said, the Department of Defense actually linking into a child's doll or something like that. That's ridiculous.
Well, it's a Department of Defense contractor, and again, it's the Nuance Corporation. And what the dolls are is they're dolls that your children can have conversations with. And the danger there is twofold. First of all, everything the child is saying is being sent to Nuance, and who knows what they're doing with it. And of course, they're going to be sending things back to your child outside the earshot and control of the parent, And it could be as benign as saying, well, you know, we're going to have the little friend, we're going to have the dog that goes with the talking thing, and you want to tell your parents, you know, to buy that. Or even in an election year, they could be saying, oh, I really like Hillary Clinton, and you should tell your parents how much you love Hillary Clinton. I mean, the potential for abuse is there. No way would I ever get that for any child I cared about.
Right. Well, that's basically the same idea as my daughter is in middle school, or junior high, as I call it. That she, you know, people don't call it that anymore. They call it middle school. I say, well, did you come from the low school? You're going to the middle school, then the high school. What does that mean? I mean, that's what I say to them. But anyway, she's in junior high, and she has a laptop computer, which the school does not allow her to bring home, which is fine with me. Because I appreciate the fact that at least they're thinking along the lines of, well, maybe they're thinking these are expensive pieces of hardware, they don't want them walking away. But here in Wyoming, it's far less likely than a larger, you know, higher populated area. But at the same time, they're also probably also thinking that they could be used for invasion of privacy purposes, or the children could be using them for other things, you know, other than doing their homework, because they have a camera on them, they have a microphone on them, and internet access, obviously. So it's just like having a big smartphone with a keyboard on it, basically. And,
yeah, but the difference there is, of course, that, you know, you can turn the laptop off and put it in its case, so all it's hearing is muffled sounds and seeing black. There actually was a big stink a few years ago where a school district over in the eastern part of the country, and I forget exactly where it was, but it was a big scandal because this school was also issuing laptop computers to their students, and it was discovered the laptops had spyware installed on them by the school district that allowed school officials and teachers to spy on the children in their homes, in their rooms, potentially in various states of undress, and the parents got very upset about that with darned good reason. So, you know, your school district may be wishing to avoid that kind of a problem. But in the end, you know, I think it makes a lot of sense for kids to have the computers available to do their homework whenever they feel like doing it, but I guess more and more schools aren't even assigning homework anymore.
Well, I mean, the homework that's assigned sometimes is, I mean, and from what I've seen, actually I won't go into that, but I'll just say that, you know, I think that it's probably one of the smarter things that a school would do is not sending the computer home, because obviously if the computer stays at home and never comes back to the school, I mean, not by intention, but because the child forgets it, because the parents forget it, because they go on vacation, whatever, and they leave it in the closet or something like that, well, then it's potentially a piece of hardware, as I say, a piece of expensive hardware that's off the books now, or something like that.
Well, you know, theft is a problem. When I worked at, when I was teaching over at the Academy for Creative Media, the department had several laptops, and a couple of them went missing. And, of course, I had my own laptop that I'd gotten while working on Lost that was a little more grandiose than the department-supplied laptop, so I never had one. But, yeah, it can be an issue.
Right, you don't have to worry about the low-end equipment that they supplied, even though it's probably expensive, and maybe they bought them at bulk or something like that. But anyway, I just wanted to bring those things up because I think that you know, I'm glad you hit on that subject of invasion of privacy, because as I say, the Samsung television's been doing it for years. And
well, let me finish up one more thing, and then I got to let you go because I got some news and another caller. The schools actually get very, very good discounts from the computer makers for the computers, because they want the kids to get used to a Windows machine or a Mac machine, because they understand that as the student leaves school and grows up, they'll want to continue using Windows if that's what they're used to, or continue using Mac if that's what they're used to. And so the schools actually do get very, very good deals. And that's great because it does get the hardware into the hands of the kids. And in this day and age, if you don't know how to use a computer, you are at a serious disadvantage. Anyway, Tim, we're going to let you go here. And let me grab a couple of stories here before I take this last phone call. Now, Alaska Airlines has had to cancel dozens of flights from the SeaTac airport because of winter weather. They're getting hammered really hard. The Old Farmer's Almanac was absolutely right. Winter's arriving late, but it's very, very hard indeed. And you would think the global warming people would have the honor and decency to say, you know, maybe we were wrong. But as it turns out, there are some of the scientists who were on board Al Gore's little get-rich-quick scheme early on are now coming on out and saying, yeah, at this point it's obvious we were very, very wrong. And that's in combination with Lord Monckton is out there on the speaking tour about the global warming hoax. And they're really beginning to understand that, yeah, the world has not warmed. It's actually gotten colder. It's got absolutely nothing to do with people and everything to do with the sun. And remember, that corporate media was out there pushing that lie. You humans are warming the earth. And not just the corporate news channels, but all the so-called science channels were out there. Oh, you humans are warming the earth. National Geographic was fully on board with all of this. Smithsonian Channel was on board with this. The Science Channel was on board with this. Discovery Channel, all of them. They were all involved in this gigantic hoax to trick you out of your money for carbon credits and carbon taxes and to trick you into obedience to a global environmental authority who would tell you how to live your life so that you're not wrecking the earth. And it was all a lie. A gigantic, huge lie. And anybody who says wide-ranging conspiracies against the general population, we've got one. Staked out on the ground, naked for you to study, and it's called human-caused global warming. Now, apparently, there is a new piece of software from Tyler Technologies, and it's called the Odyssey Case Manager, and it is a court system that's used in courts all across America. And as it turns out, it is horribly buggy. It is so bad, it's getting people wrongfully arrested. And yet, it's all over our court system. And it's making mistakes. It's assigning names to the wrong files. When a judge makes a ruling, it's entered into Odyssey, and then law enforcement relies on what's coming up on that little computer screen in their police car. They don't test this stuff before it goes on out. They don't have to. Remember, computer software is indemnified against harm by U.S. law. All right, let's grab a couple more phone calls. Jerry in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thank you very much for taking my call. I'll make this real quick. Your last caller was talking about the Sony televisions recording you as you were sitting in your house making comments on a television show.
Yes.
I turned my cell phone off at a location that I go to a couple times a year because I know I get no cell phone service, and it roams, and your phone, you wake up in the morning, your phone is dead. So I personally turned it off, and the next morning when I got up, there was no power on the phone. When I turned it off, I had 78% power on this thing. So there is a alternative power source that's drawing for information, and I locked it up in my car, to be honest with you.
Well, hang on a second. Is your phone an Android device?
It's a Samsung Galaxy phone.
Okay, that's an Android device. My wife actually has one of those, and it is a real problem. There are a couple of overlapping issues. One is the Android operating system is constantly spawning new applications and processes. When you turn the phone off, it's not really off, and processes can still be running. You need to go through that little procedure of shutting down unused applications and clearing out the memory every day or so, or you're going to have 30, 40 apps running on the phone even when it's off, and that will drain the battery down. Something else you also need to be aware of is the way it handles Wi-Fi. For some reason, there is an automated system in there where the phone, and we've caught Claire's phone doing it, it'll stop using the Wi-Fi and go on to the metered 4G LTE service for which we are billed. And there doesn't seem to be any way to lock it saying Wi-Fi only. Frankly, I'm fed up with Android. Buying this phone for Claire was a mistake, and I've already promised her when this one finally dies, I don't care what it costs, I'm going to get her back on the large-sized iPhone. because it is so much better. And I understand Android originally was a very cool system, but everybody who's co-opted it for their products, they hijack it, they put their own sales pitch in front of it. It's all being done very recklessly, and frankly, I think this Android, as it's implemented on this Samsung Galaxy phone, is a piece of absolute crud.
Okay, well, hey, I'll agree with you there, because I think somebody came in from inside and left this thing on, is all I can tell you, because I was expecting some important call the next morning, and I had to go find a charger.
Well, again, there is stuff running on the phone, even when it's switched off. You need to learn how to use that little button at the bottom. You press it, I think it's twice real quick, and you get up a display of all the apps that are running, and you just need to shut them all off. And there's a little pie chart emblem on the left. You push that, and it shuts down even more applications you don't know are there. It really is a very, very badly implemented system, and that's what's going on. It's not somebody coming in hacking from outside. It's just the poor design and implementation of that particular brand of Android.
No, I'll check it as soon as I get off the line. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right. We'll talk to you real soon about that one. All right. Let's go to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, aloha to you both. In line with the TV and the doll scenario, I am enjoying the dust cover I have over the TV screen, so I'll put over that. Not to mention turning off the electricity to it via a plug extension.
Yes.
So until Mother Half gets home, and then he can play with it to his heart's content, to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
As for the doll part, that is absolutely horrid. But quite frankly, you know what? When you folks were talking about that, you reminded me of some of the scenes from the one film called The Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger with the Sim doll or whatever the heck it was. Not to mention the cloning and everything else, but it was kind of right eerie hearing about a doll that does all that, and yet at least according to that doll, you can actually shut it off. This other one that you're talking about doesn't sound like you can shut it off.
Well, you can block it from your Wi-Fi, but if you do, then the doll's functionality stops. The whole point of these two dolls are that your child can talk to them and interact with them, and if you shut off the Wi-Fi, then it's just a doll that they can pound on and throw against the wall. Got to let you go here, Francis. Got to take a break for commercial. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and an alert listener tracked down the story about the laptops. This happened back in 2010, and it was basically in Philadelphia. One of their school districts was handing out the computers to the students, one each, and the cameras, or rather the laptops, were equipped with webcams and loaded with spyware. And the scandal came to light because apparently a student was brought into his counselor about inappropriate behavior in his own home and shown a photograph taken from the laptop webcam in his room at home. I don't know what he was doing, and it frankly wasn't any of the school's business to be monitoring the behavior of students in their home. That's the parents' job. And so this blew on up and resulted in a lawsuit. And frankly, I think those school administrators should have been fired. Now, there's something you need to understand about children, okay? They do have a need for privacy the same as anybody else. And the fact that they want some private time doesn't necessarily mean they're doing something bad or wrong or illegal. They just want to be private. And if they don't have that, if they don't feel they have a space where they can think their own thoughts, that can actually lead to mental illness. Remember that whole thing where these postal workers started carrying out mass shootings, and it led to the slang phrase going postal? That was actually caused by the post office bringing in all these efficiency experts who were constantly spying on the postal workers and just trying to find little ways they could work better, and just real nitpicky, turn your wrist this way rather than this way when you fling the mail into the box, and it just drove them all crazy. The authority of the teachers and officials at a school ends at the school ground borders. Period. End of discussion. These parents had a right to be outraged, and they had a right to sue. We have an inherent, inalienable right to privacy. It's mentioned in that Fourth Amendment, even though the government likes to pretend they're not bound by it. People need private space. For all the liberal talk about safe space this and safe space that, it's amazing how little understanding and respect they have for the fact that people do need privacy, just so that they can let their minds wander and daydream and fantasize. And it doesn't mean they're behaving badly. It's just private time. And if you're constantly invading that with cameras and microphones and the appliances, you're going to drive people crazy. You're going to get a very negative reaction. So, down in Texas, they have passed this law where women who undergo an abortion have to have an actual funeral for the remains of the fetus. Either burying them, which is very costly, or cremation, which is also very costly. A lot of people are saying it's just a form of harassment to make abortion more difficult. And not too surprisingly, healthcare providers are opposed to it. And rather surprisingly, so are funeral directors. They don't think this is a good idea, even though they're going to make money off of it. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. And until then, aloha, America.